Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NCD News. I'm your host, Melina Weiskup. Some breaking developments in the biggest national security breach in a decade. Law enforcement authorities today arrested a 21-year-old suspect who's allegedly the man behind the leak of dozens of classified documents on the internet. NTD's Iris Tao joins us from the White House with the details.
The FBI has arrested Jack Teixeira, a 21-year-old airman in the Massachusetts Air National Guard who's now suspected of leaking highly sensitive Pentagon documents online. Attorney General Merrick Garland confirmed the Thursday afternoon arrest, suggesting that Teixeira could face charges under the Espionage Act.
Today, the Justice Department arrested Jack Douglas Teixeira in connection with an investigation into alleged unauthorized removal, retention, and transmission of classified national defense information.
U.S. officials have been searching for the source of the leak, which potentially exposed hundreds of pages of classified documents on the war in Ukraine, as well as U.S. spying on not only adversaries, but also allies. And the Pentagon on Thursday said it's working hard to find out more about the scope of the leak.
We continue to work around the clock, along with the interagency and the intelligence community, to better understand the scope, scale, and impact of these leaks.
The breaking development of an arrest came after the FBI swarmed the home of Teixeira in Massachusetts on Thursday. Before he was identified, members of the online chat group run by the leaker told media outlets the leaker was a young gun enthusiast who worked on a military base. One of the members told the Washington Post the leaker only shared the documents to keep the group in the loop and was not working for another country. Meanwhile, hours before the arrest, President Biden in Ireland said he expected an arrest shortly, adding,
"I'm not concerned about the leakages, and I'm concerned that it happened. But there's nothing contemporaneous that I'm aware of that is of great consequence."
The suspect will then have an initial appearance at the U.S. District Court in Massachusetts. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
And more news on the White House. The Biden administration is seeking to expand federal health care coverage for DACA recipients. That's a term that refers to illegal immigrants who came to the states illegally. The administration laid out a plan today, and President Biden posted this on Twitter.
By allowing them to enroll in the plan through the Affordable Care Act or through Medicaid. Health care should be a right, not a privilege. My administration has worked hard to expand health care.
They'll do this through the Department of Health and Human Services, according to a White House fact sheet. It would involve changing the definition of lawful presence. But this plan is likely to face court challenges, as right now the entire DACA program is being challenged in court by Texas and other states with Republican attorneys general. And we have more on former President Trump's mounting legal challenges in New York City. Trump was back in the Big Apple this morning to testify in a $250 million civil lawsuit led by New York's Attorney General Letitia James. The lawsuit alleges fraud in his real estate business practices. NTD's Arlene Richards is in New York City with more.
Former President Donald Trump returns to New York for the second time in a week, this time visiting the office of Attorney General Letitia James, where he's being questioned under oath in a case that alleges he misled banks and others about the value of his assets. The specifics of today's deposition will not be immediately known, but Trump's attorney Alina Habba told CBS News that President Trump is not only willing, but also eager to testify before the Attorney General today. She said Trump had nothing to conceal. Trump was also deposed in August before James filed the suit. At that time, he repeatedly invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination in response to hundreds of questions. The suit is a culmination of James' years-long investigation into the Trump Organization's business practices. Specifically, the 200-page filing details alleged efforts by Trump to inflate his personal net worth to attract favorable loan agreements. It cites 200 instances of fraud in over 10 years. The DA's 34-count indictment last week similarly charged Trump with fraudulent business practices. It alleges Trump wrote checks as legal expenses to disguise a hush money payment to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. The former president wrote on Truth Social last night that he had arrived in Manhattan for the deposition, which he called another unjust and ridiculous persecution of the 45th president of the United States. He said the case was very unfair, and that James had sought out a Trump-hating judge to oversee the case. In other legal woes for Trump, the special counsel probe in the January 6th matter is now investigating the former president for wire fraud. The Washington Post reports that special counsel Jack Smith is probing whether Trump or the advisors violated the wire fraud law by using false claims about voter fraud to raise money. Under the law, it's illegal to make false representations over email to swindle people out of money. Fox's Tucker Carlson responded to this latest development.
Of course, this is an effort to sideline the frontrunner in the Republican Party while they figure out what to do with Joe Biden.
After the deposition in New York today, Trump is expected to return in the fall for the trial. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
An appeals court is granting people access to abortion pills again, but there are restrictions. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice is getting involved, asking for a Supreme Court ruling. Here's what the White House had to say about it today as Biden continues his visit in Ireland.
We are going to continue to fight in the courts. We believe that the law is on our side and we will prevail.
Last week, a federal court in Texas completely blocked access to the pills. Now the appeals court is allowing people to use them again. But the appeals court changed a few rules. The drug can't be sent through the mail, and the court ruled on rolling back how far into the pregnancy the pills can be taken, from 10 weeks down to 7 weeks in. But the Department of Justice now wants to restore the 10-week limit and allow it to be sent through the mail again. Just today, the DOJ asked the U.S. Supreme Court to pause the new rule changes. Now, to discuss the latest court ruling on these abortion pills, we have Katie Glenn, who comes from a prominent pro-life organization. Glenn will explore with us how these pills were granted approval in the U.S. and some of the potential risks for women's health. All right, joining me to discuss this is Katie Daniel, who's the State Policy Director at the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America organization. Katie, your organization celebrated the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling last night, but this ruling still does allow women to access that abortion pill. Why are you all still supportive of the latest ruling?
Well, we see this as a first great step. The Fifth Circuit said in their order that they think that these pro-life doctors have a high likelihood of winning their final case, which does ask for these drugs to be pulled while the FDA does the research it never did to determine safety and efficacy. So we think it's a great start. It will replace those original 2000 rules that require the in-person doctor's visits, that will require that women have somebody they can go to if they have complications. So we see this as a step forward in what's going to be a long process.
This case revolves around the FDA's safety standards. Now, the fact that the FDA fast-tracked the approval for the drug without being 100% clear on how it would affect teenage girls specifically, and the fact also that the Biden administration allowed it to be sold by mail in the first place. What are your thoughts, Katie, on what this says about our overall culture with regards to abortion?
Well, Bill Clinton came into office and he said in his first week in office, this is a priority for my administration. We are going to get this done. And in the final weeks of his presidency in 2000, they finally did the approval, and they had to do it through a fast-track process. They had to reclassify pregnancy as a life-threatening illness when we know that it's not. And they didn't do some of the studies they're required by law to do. They waived the requirement, for example, to study the effects on minors. So they approved a drug that is a hormone antagonist, a drug that messes with your hormones for girls who are going through puberty without any data showing that it would be safe or effective for these little girls. They did that because it was important to them to get it on the market before he went out of office. So this has been politicized from the start. It's been flawed from the start. And this case is a great time to reverse those wrongs.
It's interesting you just said that the administration had to label pregnancy as a life-threatening illness, which is interesting because if you look at the mental health aspects of abortion, it could also be argued that abortion is also a life-threatening or a mental health-threatening illness as well, or it would create those mental health issues. I just want to ask your perspective on what would you say to women and young girls who may view these restrictions as a bad thing and they would like to keep this drug widely accessible? How would you explain to a young girl or a woman, how would you comfort her in explaining why it's better to restrict this access to this drug?
Well, I think everybody should look at the science. When we look at European studies where they have single-payer health systems, we've got much better data. they show that as many as 1 in 5 women can end up in the hospital taking these drugs at a later gestation. Even Planned Parenthood and the FDA have admitted that 1 in 20 women are likely going to end up in the hospital. So if you're thinking about your own safety, this is not safe, and this is not something that you want to take. Luckily, we have thousands of pregnancy centers and tons of other resources all around our country that want to help women who are in an unexpected pregnancy, who are scared, who feel like they need help. We want to help you. The solution is not to abort your baby. The solution is to find people, even strangers, who will help you and care for you and your baby.
Katie Daniel, thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.